Hello, my name is Keith Instone. Let's talk about the Detroit Red Wings user experience and customer experience for about a half an hour, and then we'll have a discussion over on Hoovoo. So, yeah, let's go ahead and get started. What a weird topic. Let's see how it works. So, a little bit about me. I'm a user experience consultant based in Toledo. I've been involved in the user experience community for a long, long time. Right now, I'm putting a lot of time into the Michigan UXPA association. We can talk about that a little bit at the end. My careers expand academia, industry, and consulting, which I think provides an interesting perspective on user experience. So I'm a hockey nut. I've been long ago when I was much younger. I was really involved in college hockey, doing things like the first CCHA website and helping the NCAA figure out how to select teams for their national tournament. As a hockey nut, it sort of bled over into my family. So my kids went to lots of BGSU Falcon games and so on. Perhaps probably the highest honor a Red Wings dad could have is my oldest daughter over on the right. When she was filling out a profile for one of these dating apps, she put in a criteria that her matches must be Red Wings fans. She found a Red Wings fans. They've been dating for quite a while. As soon as COVID will let us, they'll get married and maybe we'll have Red Wings grandkids. So the Red Wings, yes, hooray! A team in Michigan that's had great success, fun to root for, part of our culture, in Michigan and even in the Midwest. So let's sort of take a fun view and let's talk about the Red Wings as a competitive team, as an organization, and as part of a community, and relate that to what it might mean for user experience and customer experience as a practice, as a discipline, as activities that we do as part of our jobs. So yeah, let's take a fun angle, any chance to talk about the Red Wings. So I've been doing talks over the past year or so about different spins on user experience. It's a very confusing term. People are using it in lots of new and innovative ways, in addition to old-fashioned ways. We won't have time to cover all 16 spins that I'm up to now. You could go to the link at the bottom and study that more, but we'll talk about a few of them. We'll talk about process, methodology, field of study, just a few of those spins today. So the clusters that we'll talk about is user experience as a phenomenon, user experience as a set of activities that we do to get our job done, user experience, and then customer experience as organizational capabilities that our organizations do in order to be successful, and then disciplines at scale sort of outside of the companies that we work for every day. So you may have probably a channel-focused view on experiences, which is just fine, right? Here's a company has customers. We interact with our customers in different channels. A hot term now is digital channels, and often user experience people are focused on those digital channels. Of course, there's other channels, in-person channels if you have a retail store, analog channels, I guess, right? If you have digital channels, you must have analog ones, which is, customer service on the phone. And so you view experiences through channels, and that is just fine. Right now, it's getting a little bit confusing because channels are starting to merge with different technologies. Then, if you're going to have a chat service on your website, how's that different from just calling somebody on the phone? I don't know. So, but there's definitely one perspective on channels. I tend to think of it in terms of context. And this is related to the first spin on user experience as a phenomenon, right? As a thing that happens in people's brains when they use things. So I've got this general definition of user experience. It's an impression that someone gets when interacting with a system, right? So that's just the general version. And then it sort of gets customized in lots of different ways. There's lots of different ways to say impression, feelings, attitudes. Who is that someone? It's often a customer, but sometimes that someone is an employee. When I've done things with the state of Michigan government, we focus more on citizens. If you're in healthcare, you might be talking about patients, right? Instead of customers. And then what exactly is this system? The system can vary from products to services. So one way that I think this sort of general definition is handy is like this Forbes we can fit other definitions underneath it. So in this Forbes example that I'm referencing here, they define customer experience as a perception a customer gets when interacting with a brand. That sounds like a good definition. That's just a variation, a more specific version of my sort of working definition of user experience. You can check out the CXFM blog entry that I wrote a couple months ago for even more if you really want to get into users and customers and who those someones are. But when I think of, when I do my work, I often focus first on a context of use. So that's where I enter into sort of the situation. It might be a website or a mobile app or some other software system usually. But the key is when you start with that context of use, you then have to go to broader context. So let's say I was asked to work on an app to help salespeople sell solar panels more effectively, more efficiently. Improve the company's bottom line by selling more solar panels, right? So part of that would be to understand the broader context of use. Selling solar panels varies a lot based on the country that the buyer is in, or where the solar panels are being installed, because different countries have different commitments to alternative energy, right? So in order to work on some sort of app for selling solar panels, you're going to have to understand the broader context of what's happening out in the world, right? And there's multiple layers of that. At the same time, we can go to more specific contexts of use. So in this case, I could be asked to just sort of do the employee side on the sales side, but I found it much more effective if I can also work on the customer side as well. Sort of doing these double facing applications, because if I can only change the customer side, or if I can only change the employee side, I can sort of get halfway there to making good experiences. But often to make a good experience on one side, you have to be making changes to the other side. So again, focusing on the context of use, sometimes broader, sometimes narrower, and then often the key to many projects that I work on is putting together that right combination of contexts. We can't tackle them all at once, but the right combination that lets us make advances. If we're going to talk about user experience, we have to talk about design at some level. They're related, not exactly one and the same, but very related. So I like to think of these sort of just general phases of making awesome experiences. There's a define phase, which you sort of figure out why you're doing and in general what you're doing. The design phase, which is really about the specific what that you actually want to do and coming up with a specification for what you want that experience to be. And then deliver is how are you going to do that on a day-to-day basis, on an ongoing basis. For a lot of companies, or at least for some companies, design traditionally has been this make it pretty stage. And so when design is only involved in making it pretty, there's often pretty big gaps between define and deliver, because design has a very, very narrow role. Some companies have start quoting Steve Jobs, and they say, no, design is more than that. Design is how it works, right? So then that lets design get more involved in the functionality and in the requirements, and gets them closer to bridging the gap between the define and the deliver phase. Other companies have really bought into design as this more general problem-solving technique, and so this is often with like an innovation group within a company. They will be using design techniques to figure out what the problem is that they need to innovate on, and using design techniques as a problem-solving technique. And so when design is seen as a problem-solving technique, then it starts to bleed into define and deliver and make things more cohesive, which in general is a good thing. And then there's some companies which they just do things the designerly way. They think of design as a way of thinking that permeates everything, all the decisions that they make, the way that they figure out what's of value and what their business model is going to be, and things like that. So again, a discussion on how user experience and customer experience relate to each other will also be tied into which sort of level, which maturity level of design we're talking about. And of course, it varies a lot from one organization to the next, and it varies over time within a given organization. So let's get into some Red Wings examples. So the first thing, if we think of Red Wings as a competitive team, right? They're on the ice, they're trying to win a game, somebody else is going to lose a game. Only one team can win the cup every year, and whatever, there's 30 losers in that sense, right? There's one Stanley Cup winner and a whole lot of Stanley Cup losers in a given year. And sometimes, it's competitive. Sometimes it's winning and losing the game. Sometimes it's all about, winning and or like losing teeth, right? Losing teeth is part of that competitive battle. So from a user experience perspective, I have these group of things I call organizational capabilities, such as having a team and a strategy and a mindset that define how we do things related to user experiences and customer experiences within an organization. And that can be very competitive with other teams within the organization, competing strategies and competing mindsets. So within some organizations, these capabilities are competing with each other. So it's sort of like the Red Wings competing with the Avalanche. So as just one example, you may have a user experience team within your company. Uh, Common roles are here on the left that are on a user experience team. If you talk to different companies around the world, definitely lots of designer roles and variations on designer roles on a user experience team, but also things like architects and content strategists, UX writers. That's another role that's emerged that I don't even have on the list, accessibility specialists and so on, right? So those are the sort of roles that are often on a team. And again, this team's mission is usually to, define, design, and deliver great user experiences, right? But sometimes that team isn't called a user experience team. Sometimes it's just called a design team or a product design team. If the organization's into product, and we have a lot of product people, then it might be a product. It might be the design team for the product team. Could also be called customer experience. In large organizations, they have multiple user experience teams. They have each one for each business unit, because there's a lot of specialized things, and they sort of spread things around instead of centralizing it. In the old days, we call them usability teams. And who sort of takes ownership of the user experience within an organization has a huge impact on how the team is operated, what the team's goals are. I've seen it across all spectrums of C-level executives. Sometimes there's a chief executive officer. Sometimes I've talked to several CTOs where uh, part of their mission is coming into the company and using technology to drive better user experiences. So it's really a technology-driven thing. Other times it's a marketing-driven thing. I've even seen user experience teams in HR departments that are focused on the employee experience, right? So again, user experience, and from an ownership perspective or where the team lives, that's all over the place, and it has a lot of different has an impact on different things, especially at the level of engagement. Sometimes it's sort of the manager that says they own it. Sometimes it's a director, vice president. Sometimes it goes up to the top. So again, how does this relate to a customer experience team and so on? Is something we'll get into, are some of the questions that we'll ask. We could also think of user experience as these different mindsets on how the organization thinks about how difficult it is to develop good user experiences. Some organizations, when I talk, like, this is just common sense. As long as we just don't do stupid stuff for our users, if we just listen to them a little bit, and if we just pay attention and do basic stuff, that's going to lead to good experiences. For some organizations, that's all that they need. Other organizations, they need to make sure that they have the right tools, if to make it more efficient, because that's one way to scale, or if having a repeatable process because you have new people joining the team. And so being able to deliver maybe a good user experience every single time often requires some sort of process. Of course, there's a management angle to it. How do you manage the people? How do you manage the experience? How do you manage the work? Some organizations think of it as a strategic asset. Other ones are more bottom up. As long as the people in the trenches are focused on good user experiences, the folks at the top might focus on other things. Some organizations, everybody's doing it across the board. Some groups think of it as a professional activity, like, hey, all of our people in accounting are CPAs, right? All of our engineers are licensed engineers. Some of them think like all of our, we want people committed to the user experience profession as well. So again, different levels, and a lot of these mindsets, all of these mindsets can exist at the same time, and sometimes they can compete with each other, right? So like, hey, if you've got more of a tool mindset, then you're going to be focused on getting the right tools, and you may not be, perhaps you'll be focused on what the tool does and not necessarily on what the strategic value is, or even like, let's make sure that we're doing this in a scientifically sound way, independent of the tool. So sort of as a summary, I forgot to mention, I don't have any answers here. I'm just going to be using this to ask questions. So these are things that you may want to start posting in the Q&A for this one, or just start to noodle on and think about later on. But if we think of these competing capabilities, right? The Red Wings as a very competitive team, then user experience and customer experience, they might be competing within your organization. There might be teams in different parts of the organization. They're competing for resources. This competition can be very healthy, but it could be unhealthy. Um, Over time, it might be good to reorg, right? If you've got some journey mapping happening in different places, you might, you could centralize your journey mapping service perhaps, or maybe it's better to distribute it, right? So these are the sort of questions of, in your organization, if we have user experience and customer experience capabilities, how do they fit together? When do they compete? And how do they compete? And what's the best way to, again, serve the ultimate goal of making great experiences for customers and users? The second way to think of the Red Wings is this complex organization of lots of different people with lots of different roles, right? There's lawyers that work for the Red Wings, and marketing folks, and operations people, and ticket sales people, and creative directors, and director of purchasing, and even a director of guest experience down at the bottom. Lisa's the director of guest experience. Maybe she's even at our event here today. And they have very specialized roles, like an immigration manager, and not just coaches, but very specific video coaches, right? So if we think of the Red Wings as this organization, has to be highly functional with lots of specialized activities, right? Everybody's sort of got to do their own job, but the jobs have to fit together, and we have different roles and responsibilities. We could use that to think about user experience in terms of what I call these different activities, these things that we do in order to define, design, and deliver good experiences. I broken them down into processes, methodologies, different roles, tools, and different skill sets. So we'll just talk about some of those, these different activities that user experience people do. And then that will raise us questions about, like, well, when do customer experience people do similar activities that complement it, or maybe they're different. So it's hard to talk about user experience without talking about, like, design processes. And so this double diamond is one that's very, very popular, very common. And the idea being that when you come up with a problem, you don't rush to the solution. The first thing you do is, when you have some inkling of a problem, we explore the problem space to figure out what is the root cause of the problem, or what is the one, what is the key thing that we want to focus on for this particular project. So there's this divergent stage where you sort of explore the whole space, and then you converge back on, because you can't do everything all at once. So then you end up sort of picking one that's the biggest bang for the buck kind of project, right? And that's sort of the plan in the middle. Once you do that, you don't rush to the solution, but we do another diverging stage where we look at a wide range of solutions to that problem. And then we converge on the one that we can actually execute on and ship, right? Because again, you don't want to do all solutions to a problem. That's not efficient. So again, this idea of a process is important in user experience work. And now we can talk about, how does this process complement some customer experience processes that you already have, and what's the best of both. Another thing that we do a lot in user experience work are different methods. So this is a sort of a landscape of user research methods. One dimension is behavioral versus attitude. Do we want to learn how users are behaving, or do we just want to learn what they think, or what they want to tell us on how they behave? The other dimension is, do we want qualitative data, or do we want quantitative data? And again, there's pros and cons to qualitative and quantitative. So something like A/B testing is great, because it shows us how people actually behave when we give them, like, two different versions of a website, and it gives us quantitative data. We can say 75% of the users proceeded to buy something on version B versus version A. And so we can make decisions based on hard numbers. So that's great. And it's also great because that's in the natural use of the context. So that tells us some things, but that we can't rely on that as our only user research method. We'd be missing other things. So we might also do ethnographic field studies. We might do card sorting. We might do interviews. We might do email. The key being that we have lots of different methods. We want to pick the right method for the right kind of job. And it's the combination of the different methods that will actually give us true insights, rather than just, if we based all of our decisions based on how people filled out a survey we sent through email, then we'd be missing some key things, because we know that people behave differently than how they tell us they're going to behave. If we look at what some people are saying are these skills that people need to have to be really good at user experience, right? So to be able to do good ethnographic studies, you have to have some empathy, right? You have to be able to connect with the people you're talking with. You have to be able to understand, you have to be able to share some of those feelings. But it's also about being a team player, having passion and energy. User experience, a lot of it is around communication and listening to what stakeholders are telling you are the business needs, but also listening to users and customers about uh, what, not necessarily just what they need, but listening to get deeper into what uh, to what they may not even realize that they need. Okay. And other skills like sketching and storytelling, right? So a lot of user experience is like telling a story about what that user experience might be in order to get everybody on the same page, right? So again, these are all different skills. If you look at them, I suspect you'd say a lot of these are the same skills that would be good for customer experience people as well, and even just employees in general. Like, who doesn't want an employee to be creative, right? Even you want your CPAs to be creative, as long as they're still not too creative that they're going beyond legal rules. So if we think of complementary activities, all the complementary activities that the Red Wings need in order to be successful off the ice and on the ice, then we can think about user experience and customer experience. What are our complementary activities? Which things complement each other? Maybe it's as simple as, the UX team does one thing for digital channels and the CX team does the same things for the analog channels. Maybe it's that simple, but maybe we think of it in terms of our define, design, and deliver phase. I know lots of UX teams are really good at design, so they often could take the lead on that, just during that part in the middle, because they've got all the designers on their team. But it also raises other questions of, like, in your voice of the customer program, are you really good at quantitative things, but not so good on the qualitative side? Then that would be a good time to bring in some of your user experience folks to help you round out, maybe do some ethnographic studies with customers sort of out in the field to complement the other things that you know, right? So again, it's just sort of looking at your voice of the customer program. And I think there's some things that we should just teach each other or share or maybe do together. Things like journey mapping, maybe in your organization, that should just be something that's a shared activity. The third way to think about the Red Wings is they're not just a team, but they're part of the larger Detroit and Michigan and Midwest sort of culture and community, right? So, they don't compete head to head with the Tigers or the Pistons or the Lions, but they're all part of, many sports fans might be fans of all four at once. They might be giving back to the community, visiting kids in hospitals, donating to charities, supporting causes, right? So they're not just a team on the ice; they're they're the fabric, right? I think what we say in Toledo, the walleye and the mud hens, they're part of the fabric of our community here in Toledo. And then likewise, if you think of them as they're just one team in the NHL, right? If the NHL doesn't do certain things, the Red Wings won't be successful. Down the line, the Grand Rapids Griffins and the Toledo Walleye, go Walleye. They need to be successful to develop the talent, right? So if you look at a player like Luke Glendening, he wouldn't be as good of a Red Wing as he is without Red Berenson coaching him at the University of Michigan, and his time at the Walleye and with the Griffins, and all the coaches along the way, right? So that they're part of, like, this hockey profession, this hockey industry. So they're part of something much bigger than just the Red Wings, right? So if we think of user experience and customer experience as these things that exist beyond the sort of the walls of the companies that we work for, then we start to think of these spins like a field of study, right? Where's the body of knowledge that helps us figure out what we do? Where are the communities and practices where we can hang out? So an event like this is part of the community of practice of CX folks in the state of Michigan. And since you've invited us UX folks, we're sort of part of that community too. And then we can get into, even going a level higher, being a profession, maybe perhaps being certified, having a code of ethics, those sort of things that go along with being a profession. So just for one example, I've been doing my talks around the world, I've been asking people, what should you study to be good at user experience? Usually a top answer is human-computer interaction. This is sort of this specialized field of study. This is where I came from, where the computer scientists that were interested in how the technology was used started partnering with people in humanities, psychology, and in the arts and so on, and created this human-computer interaction degree, an area of research, right? There's HCI conferences around the world that have been going on for like 30 years, so there's a big body of knowledge. And my little call, I was like, at the University of Michigan, I know that program, so I'm just calling out some of the local programs that I know are really excel at it, right? But when I talk to folks, they also say, like, you could just get a cognitive psychology degree, and you can learn the rest that you need about user experience on the job, right? You can figure out how to actually, do the specific kinds of user research once once you've got a foundation on human behavior. A lot of UX folks come from a graphic design and arts background, right? They sort of learn the design principles, and then they learn some extra things. Often that's called industrial design. And again, like our interaction design, if in Michigan, I just know that CCS, the College for Creative Studies, has an awesome industrial design program. There's other ones too, but that would just be one example where their industrial design program has special things, so that when you get a job, you're not just out doing the styling on the car, but you could actually help involve the software on the dashboard and the other things that go with the car. And again, and there's lots of other areas. So like at Michigan State, they've got a program in experience architecture that I helped develop, that I only half jokingly say they found a way for English majors to get good jobs, right? So if you really start with the communication, the rhetoric, and that, if you start that with your core, what some companies, think of like, oh, I need soft skills. Okay, fine. Let's find people that are really good at those communication skills. Then it's pretty easy to teach them some technology and some design methods and some other things to get them good at everything else. Of course, business management is one source, and like we are here with this program at Michigan State, we call it CXM. Other programs I've seen, you can get a business degree in this design and innovation specialization, and that really targets you for being great at user experience. But I've also helped some clients that they start with subject matter experts, right? So like, let's say you wanted to be a user experience person on a team that developed benefits program for the state of Michigan. They focus on first having those people go work out in the field for a couple of years, then they bring them into headquarters. And then some of the folks, after you've been to headquarters, then you're sort of qualified to be on the user experience team, and we teach you some extra stuff, right? So a whole other path to UX is just be a subject matter expert and then pick up the other things. So again, there's lots of different paths, and I suspect there's some overlap and some common things definitely with what should you study to be good at customer experience as well. When we think of communities, I like to break it down into three things, or at least what I've noticed for user experience, there's sort of three different types of communities. One, I would call them aficionados. They're interested in this interesting thing called user experience. It fascinates them. They want to learn more about it. It might be just to become better project managers or better software developers or better digital marketing people, but they want to learn about user experience, pick up some of our techniques, and then they go back and keep doing their same old job. Other ones are looking at it as a career path. They've read some hype that says there's a whole bunch of UX jobs out there. Maybe you want to do that. Maybe you don't want to be a dental assistant or a paralegal. You want to be a UX person. Tell me what that is. There's another group of communities that are around practitioners who have a job. They're going to conferences like this. They're trying to find mentors to help them get better at their job, because if there's anything, once you get a UX job, you're now on a hamster wheel of continuous learning, because things change so fast. Then there's another level of category that are more professional. They're talking about bodies of knowledge, certifications, interacting with academia. So again, I think the CXFM community is awesome at this professional level of connecting academia with industry. So those are the sort of the three different levels of communities. And so this is just a fun sort of map I made of the user experience communities that I've been interacting with in Michigan, and sort of mapping them out. So there's things like the Detroit UX, which is a meetup, which is very broad and general. It's a great introduction. If you're just interested in UX, you should be hanging out there. There's Ignite UX events, which is also awesome for people getting into it. But then if you're in the automotive industry and you're really, you're a practitioner and you're developing software for cars, then you want to be hanging out at that meetup group, the Michigan Automotive Mobility UX group, because they go down much deeper than we can get into in the other more general purpose meetups, right? Again, we have lots of different groups. We have AIGA, which is mostly professional graphic designers and graphic artists, but a lot of those are working in user experience. Some of them are not. Some of them are just focused on package design or other things, but that's another place. So again, we can map out all these communities. CX of M is up here because it's working at a statewide level, but that's definitely part of the picture. So again, if we think of larger things outside of our organizations, we need to start worrying about communities. And so some of the questions we may ask is, maybe we should start this broader community of blank X, right? And not have siloed UX people over here, or patient experience people over here, government experience people over there. Maybe we should be all working together. And then more practically, maybe it might be like, what fields of study? So how can we give high school students an idea of different career paths that might pass in and out of UX and CX, right? You might start out in UX and end up in CX. You might end up in working at a call center and then later become a UX person, right? I think that there's lots of career paths that we could explore and explain to the kids, because otherwise they don't even know that jobs and what we do exist. So again, I don't have any answers. I've got lots of questions. Here's some here for starters. Hopefully you guys have already been typing questions into the chat while we've been talking. And so I'm going to hop on over to Huva. Actually, I was already there while I was doing it, so I may have answered some of these questions already. It's sort of like weird being in two places at once, but that's the way things work. And so again, thank you very much. Let's have some more conversation about user experience and customer experience. And if we can also geek out about the Red Wigs at the same time, even better. So see you over on Huva. Thanks.